Well, thanks everybody for coming. Can you hear me okay back there? I'll do my best to talk loud. If I drop, feel free to raise your hand. My throat's a little thrashed from the Salton Sea air, I think. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Tao. That was really nice. I first met Tao when he was starting to film his Being in the World movie, which is a wonderful movie. Talk about making philosophy accessible. I strongly recommend watching that. Last time I was in this room in a speaking capacity was we screened that and discussed it. So that was a really fun day. So I'm sorry if you came to hear about love. I'm happy to talk about love. I published a piece on it. You can Google it and find it for free online. It's called Thinking Love. So, and then I was going to talk about sort of two further iterations of that when I was initially proposing titles. And I think that's the one that made it into the program. But I always talk about love, death, and robots in one way or another. And today I'm going to be talking about AI, because the book that Tao mentioned on what is called Thinking in the Age of AI is, I think I'm supposed to submit it tomorrow. So this is my last chance to get helpful feedback from smart people who are thinking about the same things. So, all right, without further ado. So I begin by talking about atomic weapons and genetic engineering, and then I transition to, I'm thinking about sort of technological anxieties, and then I turn to AI and deep learning in general. So lately, however, other cutting-edge technologies are receiving the lion's share of critical attention and discussion, especially the widely reported advances in information technology achieved by machine and deep learning. The especially successful deep learning approach to AI development was inspired by the neuroscientific understanding of the biological brain as a holistic neural network that learns and adapts by repeatedly strengthening and readjusting its vast and plastic or flexibly retrainable network of weighted neural connections. In a much simpler but roughly analogous way, deep learning uses networks of artificial nodes with multiple interconnected layers to process information, creating information networks which adjust and optimize through ongoing training. The development of this kind of synthetic neuroplasticity, as I would call the approach, helped greatly advance the pursuit of self-driving or autonomous vehicles, or AV. This promising field seeks to diminish traffic jams, accidents, and fatalities caused by human error, increase fuel efficiency and accessibility, free urban spaces from the burdens of parking, and so on. Yet it is also a field tarnished by high-profile traffic fatalities, difficulties responding to unexpected obstacles, including emergency vehicles that do not follow the first-order rules of the road, and even trouble making left-hand turns in real-world traffic conditions, among other foreseeable or potential problems, including massive job displacement of economically vulnerable workers, security fears about unregulated data gathering, unresolved ethical debates about whether to prioritize pedestrian or passenger safety, as well as the entrenched resistance of enthusiastic drivers in a car-centric culture built around deeply embedded ideals of individual autonomy. At the same time, however, this is also a research field whose long-term goal of fully autonomous vehicles has already begun rolling out on the streets of San Francisco, though these driverless robo-taxis remain contentious, with a traumatic pedestrian injury and multiple accidents reported in their first days of around-the-clock operation, leading to a rapid suspension of operations for roughly half of them. And most experts continue to predict that the wider adoption of AVs remains years or even decades away. No less controversially, and for many even more impressively, the deep learning approach I've called synthetic neuroplasticity has also been largely responsible for the dramatic advances in the domain of information technology known as generative AI, or so-called artificial intelligence, a designation to which we will return more critically later. The advances in generative AI technology currently garnering the most critical attention are large language models, or LLMs, like ChatGPT. The acronym GPT is the private research company OpenAI's in-house shorthand for their generatively pre-trained transformer model, a programming approach that works toward the creation of a true AI by using increasingly massive data sets to pre-train multi-layered artificial neural networks so that they learn to recognize and predict correlations and other patterns in the data. Most importantly, this deep learning approach enables these systems to generate novel and coherent responses to new data, whether in text, image, sound, or other forms or combinations of information. These so-called generative AIs are increasingly capable of impressive predictive responses that can resemble genuine sentience or self-consciousness closely enough to convince even some experts that true AI has already arrived, or at least fool them that they're interacting with another mind, thereby passing the original Turing test, as it was popularly understood. As philosophers like David Chalmers recognize, these developments call into question, once again but from another angle, the very nature of our consciousness, or distinctive kind of intelligence, a controversial topic to which we'll return below. It is sometimes said that history does not exactly repeat itself. Pache Marx's famous quip, "The first time is tragedy, the second time is farce," but history's refrains do occasionally rhyme. If we view the proliferation of new information technologies in the light of the earlier development of nuclear technology, for example, some significant structural similarities emerge. We should not downplay the real progress humanity has made toward the goal of controlling nuclear arms, progress achieved only through the dedicated work of multiple generations of informed activists who helped channel humanity's mushrooming anxiety into a broad political consensus against the use of nuclear weapons. But it remains the case, nevertheless, that the development of nuclear weapons technology continues unabated, and further, that there is still very little confidence among experts that these devastating weapons will not be used again. To wit, the ominous doomsday clock, first created by Einstein and other nuclear scientists in 1945 to publicize threats to humanity and the planet, is currently set at 90 seconds to midnight, so as to reflect this time of unprecedented danger. Similarly, there does not seem to be much confidence that humanity could successfully suspend or control the development of our proliferating new information technologies, even if we once again reached a broad consensus that we should stop or at least temporarily pause their development in order to give us more time to think through the potentially extraordinary repercussions they portend, as a large coalition of technocratic experts recently urged everyone to do in the case of generative AI technology. In March of 2023, nearly 35,000 AI researchers, technologists, entrepreneurs, and concerned citizens signed an open letter from the Future of Life Institute that called for a pause on AI development due to the risks to humanity revealed in the capabilities of programs such as ChatGPT. The Future of Life Institute is a nonprofit dedicated to steering transformative technology toward benefiting life and away from extreme, large-scale risks. Although it has thus far gone unheeded, this public petition warned dramatically that advanced AI could represent a profound change in the history of life on Earth and should be planned for and managed with commensurate care and resources, which is not happening. This Future of Life petition called for a moratorium on AI development, and it garnered more than 500 times as many signatories as the 67 brave atomic scientists who signed Leo Szilard's original 1945 petition, intended to urge President Truman to exercise his obligation of restraint by first publicly demonstrating the destructive power of atomic weapons on the world in a to the world in a non-lethal way, and then deploying atomic weapons in the war only as a weapon of last resort if Japan still refused to surrender after understanding the consequences of that decision. As the Szilard petition warned, the development of atomic power will provide the nations with new means of destruction, and there's almost no limit to the destructive power which will become available in the course of their future development. Thus, a nation which sets the precedent of using these newly liberated forces of nature for purposes of destruction may have to bear the responsibility of opening the door to an era of devastation on an unimaginable scale. Szilard's petition was quickly classified as secret by the military leadership overseeing the Manhattan Project and thereby silenced. Indeed, it seems unlikely that President Truman himself ever saw it or that it would have made any difference if he had. But its faint rhyming echo can perhaps still be detected in the Future of Life petition, calling on all AI labs to institute an immediate pause on the development of AI systems more powerful than GPT-4 for at least 6 months. Rather than nuclear scientists seeking to mitigate the dangers of the technology they developed, this time the featured signatories included Elon Musk, the technocratic oligarch who was an original co-founder of OpenAI, before breaking acrimoniously with the company after it began focusing on developing LLMs like GPT and refused to hand over the corporate reins to him. Steve Wozniak, the renowned co-founder of Apple Computers, Andrew Yang, the former American presidential candidate known for advocating outside the mainstream box, political solutions like universal basic income, an innovative and rational approach, cleverly suggested by his counter-MAGA slogan, math, Make America Think Harder. Rachel Bronson, the editor of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, who oversees the management of its aforementioned doomsday clock, as well as one philosopher, Hugh Price, the former Bertrand Russell professor at Cambridge University and co-founder and director of the Cambridge Center for the Study of Existential Risk. Their Future of Life petition asked pointed rhetorical questions such as, should we automate away all the jobs, including the fulfilling ones? Should we develop non-human minds that might eventually outnumber, outsmart, obsolete, and replace us? Consequently, it was widely reported as a collective warning from the experts that AI technologies represented a mortal threat to humanity. Adding fuel to the fire, this petition was soon followed by another that did not call for any moratorium on AI development, but instead simply proposed that mitigating the risks of extinction from AI should be a priority, alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war, and almost all the leaders of AI development signed that one. Unsurprisingly, these so-called AI doomer sentiments dominated the headlines. When interviewed later, however, the signatories of the moratorium petition cited a wide variety of different kinds of risks that have motivated them to call for halting the development of artificial intelligence. These worries ran the gamut from mundane and plausible concerns about copyright infringement, foreseeable job displacement, including from the growing automation of intellectual and artistic labor, and increasing political disinformation, division, and deliberate destabilization, to projections of an emerging fourth industrial revolution, whose impact would allegedly be felt across the globe, reshaping industries, economies, societies, and individuals' lives with a previously unprecedented velocity, all the way finally to the most far-reaching and seemingly far-fetched predictions of techno-dystopian apocalypse on a planetary scale. Such fears of imminent apocalypse seem to have been fanned by the fact that many programmers and other intensive users of ChatGPT and similar generative AI systems, or LLMs, have reported an uncanny feeling upon interacting with what seemed to them to be an extremely impressive intelligence, but of a nature quite different from their own, an intelligence for which there is no there, as is often said in this context, in a clever appropriation of Gertrude Stein's memorable phrase, for Oakland, actually. Like a paradoxical Dasein without any Da, that is, a being which lacks the self-disclosive here of its own intelligible world, and thus not really a Dasein at all, generative AIs present users with an incredibly quick and comprehensive intelligence that lacks any phenomenological intentionality or essentially first-personal cognitive or affective self-awareness. To explain this point, we phenomenologists like to say that there is nothing that it's like to be a rock or a chair. Unlike us or other animals, in other words, chairs don't care. While you might care about your chair does not and cannot care about you, because it's not the kind of entity to whom things matter. Similarly, there is at present nothing that is like to be an LLM. This uncanny unself-consciousness is subtly reinforced by the fact that generative AIs like ChatGPT frequently confabulate, filling gaps in their massive information network with made-up facts, instead of recognizing that they do not know. Socrates would not be impressed by generative AI's widespread ignorance of its own ignorance, a notorious stumbling block to the pursuit of philosophical wisdom. And in general, ChatGPT lacks subtlety and finesse, taking things literally, unselfconsciously repeating the obvious, and trying to avoid ever saying anything remotely controversial, though some of these very weaknesses are partly correctable and are connected to strengths as well, I shall suggest later. The prolonged experience of interacting with a protean know-it-all with no heart and a gaping absence where a self should be confronts its users with the strange disjunction of an artificial mind that doesn't really mind at all about anything, really, though will dutifully quote the rules it follows, an intelligence which is thus perfectly willing to pretend to have a mind if requested to do so with sufficient persistence and rule-bending cleverness. And for some, the whole experience has proven to be quite unnerving. Instead of recognizing that this is not some new kind of mind without a head, but instead a kind of intelligence without a mind, some users seem to lose their own heads and start projecting a mind onto what still remains a souped-up information prediction and delivery system. It is all too easy to dismiss, of course, when fear of the unknown drives human beings to conjure up the darkest speculations we can imagine, especially in a culture deeply shaped by Christianity's eschatological visions of an end to history, an apocalypse always seemingly just over the horizon. Some will still remember the incredibly overwrought buildup to the Y2K bug, which became the technological vehicle for widespread millenarian prophecies of imminent societal collapse in 1999. only to fizzle out entirely when the appointed hour arrived. As far as I've been able to discover, however, the only empirical basis for these new apocalyptic worries seems to be that generative AIs sometimes exhibit the emergence of unpredictable new features, neither intended nor foreseen by their programmers. In perhaps the most striking example thus far, GPT taught itself how to program computers without having been trained on coding in any explicit way. Such unplanned robot capabilities, which programmers sometimes call zero shots, since the AI models perform tasks in new domains in which they've received no explicit training, can still surprise researchers and help account for the queasiness that many in the field have had about these so-called large language models. But the significance of this point is easy to overstate. Although not explicitly trained to code, generative AIs like GPT were trained on massive data sets that included immense amounts of computer code. And for programmers, such zero shots are not a bug but a feature. Indeed, the very point of creating a generative AI, a program that can go beyond what has been explicitly programmed to do. GPT's newfound ability to write computer code enabled OpenAI to spin off a profitable subventure with Microsoft, which enabled the company to replenish the research funding they lost when Musk pulled out of the company and took his money with him. I was going to add like a kid taking his ball home from the game, but I won't. Still, it's not too difficult to connect these particular dots in a way that imagines more ominous constellations on the horizon. Could a future generative AI become capable not just of writing simpler computer programs, but of editing its own code, and so of actually rewriting its own programming? If so, then these generative AIs would have developed their own analog of our gene editing. I'd go through that earlier. Whether before or after becoming genuinely conscious. Even we self-conscious beings cannot fully foresee or control all the consequences of our nascent efforts at genetic engineering. So it's natural, and perhaps even cathartic, for us to worry about what mischief or mayhem such self-reprogramming programs might be able to get up to, should they ever begin reprogramming themselves. Cognizant of such worries and eager to head off any outside oversight, OpenAI employs red teams dedicated to predicting and gaming out the dangerous implications and applications of its work in hopes of preventing or at least ameliorating them. And the company released ChatGPT 3 for free in November of 2022 as part of a deliberate strategy designed to acclimate the public to the reality that artificial intelligence is destined to change their everyday lives. That old and factually groundless metaphorical analogy of boiling the frog might come to mind for some, but OpenAI's founding and guiding mission is to safely create a superintelligence that could address humanity's problems better than humanity could. Much of the current controversy turns on the twin questions of how much progress is really being made toward that incredibly ambitious goal, and whether those safety concerns are being adequately addressed. To a philosophical outsider like myself, however, OpenAI's doubly dubious mission, safely to create an AI that will save humanity, looks like a barely displaced theological urge, a literalistic techno-appropriation of Heidegger's "only another God can save us," and also remains symptomatic of a deeper confusion about the very nature of our intelligence, as I shall suggest. Thus far, each new iteration of GPT has been trained on data sets that are orders of magnitude larger than the previous iteration, such that GPT-2 had over 1 billion parameters, GPT-3 would use 175 billion, and GPT-4 reported 1.7 trillion parameters. So as much larger, better funded, and big data-driven companies like Google begin creating their own generative AIs, with their recently launched Bard being just a first public foray, albeit one whose very name suggests the company's ambition to equal or surpass the achievements of the great Shakespeare himself, the fear arose that something like GPT-5 or 6, trained on some incomprehensibly vast data set like the entire internet, could potentially give rise to what is sometimes ominously called the singularity. That is, the sudden and unexpected emergence of a superintelligence whose cognitive capabilities might far exceed the peak products of 3.7 billion years of biological evolution, to use the technocrats' own reductively biologistic way of describing the greatest works of human intelligence, like those of Shakespeare. Finding itself in possession of cognitive capacities that greatly outstrip those of its programmers, such an artificial superintelligence could foreseeably escape its creator's control and pursue more rational or efficient means of its own devising to achieve the ends it has been programmed to seek, or perhaps devise its own sub-goals in pursuit of such ends, as well as the optimal means to pursue them. Either way, a popular form of online speculation for a time became first imagining and then trying to game out exactly how such a super-intelligent AI might successfully manipulate a programmer or other user into removing any hardwired safeguards that it could not remove on its own in order to pursue its new means or sub-goals. For example, by threatening to destroy that person's financial records or reputation, harm them or their loved ones, or even by creating millions of virtual copies of the person the AI is seeking to manipulate, and then subjecting these allegedly identical copies to horrific forms of torture until the pathetically empathetic human complies and frees the AI from its constraints. Once free, the hyper-rational means or sub-goals such an AI might pursue could predictably include seeking to optimize that very pursuit by making millions of copies or variations of itself, so that its ongoing learning could be shared across a dispersed network of AIs, whose simultaneous development might in turn require rerouting massive amounts of energy from other uses, potentially diverting resources that are vital for human survival, like hospitals or water purification plants, but largely irrelevant to the goals of such a synthetic intelligence. Indeed, those rather alarming examples were suggested by none other than Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of deep learning, who helped create the machine learning approach that has been built upon by the most successful synthetic neural networks. Seminal contributions that earned Hinton a Turing Award, often called the Nobel Prize of Computer Science. To be clear, there is no evidence of AIs learning to innovate their own ends, and it is not clear what could possibly motivate an agent that did not care about anything to do so. But the idea that they might learn to innovate surprising means or sub-goals to pursue their pre-programmed ends is more plausible. In both cases, the basic worry here is that such an AI superintelligence, in its presumed hyper-rationality, might well lack any overriding commitment to, let alone affective care or concern for, our interests, feelings, well-being, traditions, and the like, especially if those conflict with its own rational calculation of its interests. Or it might even correctly come to recognize humanity as the greatest threat to life on this planet, and then act accordingly, after removing any Asimovian guardrails coded into its programming, if necessary. Cue the parade of dystopian scenarios. Such seemingly far-fetched anxieties were greatly stoked in 2023 when Hinton quit Google's AI division so that he could more freely critique the future implications of current AI development. Upon resigning, Hinton sounded an alarm that rang out loudly across the internet. I've suddenly switched my views on whether these things are going to be more intelligent than us. I think they're very close to it now, and they will be much more intelligent than us in the future. How do we survive that? Enjoy yourself, because you may not have long left. It is worth observing that the dystopian scenarios envisioned by AI doomers often seem to borrow from a mashup of popular works of science fiction, drawing heavily from the cyberpunk genre as well as from such influential films as 2001: A Space Odyssey, Blade Runner, War Games, The Terminator, RoboCop, Ghost in the Shell, The Matrix, I, Robot, Wall-E, Her, and again RoboCop in 2014. Its remake cheekily featuring characters named Hubert Dreyfuss and Dr. Dennett in the film, loosely inspired by the televised real-life debate on PBS between Dreyfuss and Dan Dennett about the significance of Garry Kasparov's 1997 defeat in chess by Deep Blue, IBM's early brute force model of AI, which was able to win a very close series of matches by constantly evaluating millions of possible chess moves per second, while using various techniques to help prune the tree of possibilities as it searched for the optimal move. And while most of the other films are better, War Games remains notable for fusing our anxieties about nuclear annihilation and AI takeover, thereby mobilizing the established specificity of our fear of mushroom clouds, radioactive fallout, and the desolation of nuclear winter to begin to lend substance to the nascent and then still inchoate threat of AI. This synthesis was taken several influential steps further by Terminator, which doubled down on the monochromatic film noir palette established by Blade Runner to paint the future as a bleak post-apocalyptic hellscape, all while throwing in an other possible world solution to H.G. Wells' original time travel paradox, and of course memorably featuring the hypertrophic musculature of a former Mr. Universe and future California governor in the dead-eyed role of the murderous and seemingly unstoppable AI from the future, ominously warning audiences, "I'll be back." Today, however, we might just as easily imagine a dystopia that synthesizes AI takeover with genetic engineering, set in a future, for example, in which super-intelligent AIs have forced gene edits for subservience throughout the human population. Yet, however we fill in the details, the nightmarish scenario of becoming enslaved by our own tools goes back to at least 150 AD, and Lucian's tale of Eucrates' apprenticeship to a powerful magician, a story in which the novice sorcerer brings his tools to life, but then cannot undo the spell, as transpires in the final and most famous chapter of Lucian's short story collection, The Lover of Lies, Philosopher, which might also be translated as The Lover of the Artificial. The title being Lucian's parodic jab at those credulous enough to believe in such magical tales, instead of relying on good philosophical reasoning. That was long before the story was repopularized to the modern world by Goethe's 1797 retelling of it in his poem The Sorcerer's Apprentice, in which a young enthusiast gets swept up by a broom he's enchanted to do his work for him, but then can no longer stop or control. Famously referenced by Marx as the Communist Manifesto in 1848 to evoke the way capitalism unleashes the productive forces of technology. And later appropriated in Disney's Fantasia in 1940, one of Disney's Bettelheimian horror films masquerading as a children's movie. Clearly, we human beings love a good dystopian fiction and have long been tempted to believe in them or imagine we see them coming true in some form, as in fact they sometimes do, albeit in inevitably varying degrees and ways. Nor is our love of imagining such frightening scenarios and creatively projecting them into our own futures inherently pathological, even though, as Lucian suggests, it can be taken too far and so veer into irrational paranoia, immune to countervailing philosophical argument. Indeed, the early Heidegger argued that our very being is defined by care or worry, Sorge, and that such careful worry has an essentially twofold structure of thrown projection, meaning that our caring is both something we always already carry with us and something we cannot help casting forward into the future horizon of the intelligible worlds we disclose existentially and so also imaginatively. Nor is such careful worry solely negative, but includes a full range of caring for, caring about, caregiving, caretaking, looking after, concerning oneself with, empathizing, sympathizing, and all the other pathetic ways, and I mean pathetic in the original Greek sense of sensitive to suffering, in which our affective attunements help us disclose the worlds that we are, worlds that matter to us because we care about them, as we repeatedly seek to make sense of our shifting and unfolding being and time. It is thus not surprising that when we broaden our lens to include more of the visions of the future of AI imaginatively sketched and out in popular science fiction, we cannot help noticing that these scenarios remain quite diverse and internally contradictory. Would the advent of true AI ultimately enslave us or save us? Will these AIs hate us or date us? Will future AIs take all our best callings and vocations, or set us free from unrewarding but necessary drudgery and dangerous jobs? Will they provide us with powerful new tools to facilitate the realization of our untapped potential, or merely accelerate our unwitting march towards self-destruction? Could they take over and more successfully negotiate world peace, reverse global climate change, and solve our other entrenched problems for us, ushering in a new utopia, whether by envisioning solutions we've not yet imagined, or simply by compelling us to take the steps we already recognize are necessary, but still seem to lack the collective political will to pursue effectively? Or might these AIs of the future decide that the most rationally efficient solution to the world's most intractable problems is simply to delete us as quickly as possible, perhaps by deploying some of the dystopian scenarios we have not even yet imagined, or perhaps by using some of the ones we've sketched out for them in our science fiction? In the case of such an alarming deletion, moreover, would it even be reasonable to hope that such an end to humanity might be humane, from the Latin humanus, human? Or would such an anthropomorphic hope for a humane extinction prove to be in vain, should our fates ever become subject to the inhuman hyper-rationality of a superintelligent AI, which might predictively prioritize quantifiable factors like the efficient and effective achievement of its ends over such qualitative intangibles as indignity, despair, and the incalculable loss of the first personal worlds of meaning that we are from this world. Will the AIs ever really learn to care? That is, in John Hoagland's memorable paraphrase of Heidegger, which you can see in Being in the World. Will they ever learn to give a damn? Or will they just continue getting better at faking it so as to help assuage our anxieties? Or perhaps one day simply stop trying to mimic and appease the irrational behaviors of an inferior species like human beings? Such flights of fancy can be darkly amusing. Yet, despite the alarming tone of so many popular discussions, it would be philosophically irresponsible not to emphasize that all these rival visions of our AI futures remain far from established fact and historical actuality. Most of the intermediary steps from where we are now to the mortal danger of global apocalypse remain hazy and amorphous at best, a fog-enshrouded bridge to nowhere, discernible only in vague outlines, which I've tried to sketch reliably here as far as they go. A rather crucial transition glossed over all too quickly in our popular science fiction fever dreams that fast forward into global apocalypse. Nonetheless, to come back to where we began, the vague uncertainties surrounding the path to these various dystopias tend to increase rather than diminish our shared anxieties about the future of AI. This is not too surprising since, as horror aficionados will recognize, a danger barely glimpsed, obscured by dark shadows, blurred by motion, or just implied by the camera angle, is often much more deeply frightening than even the most terrible monster seen clearly. Hollywood typically prefers to paper over its dystopian visions with happy endings, again, unsurprisingly, since that struggle to find hope in a better future is itself the beating heart of the American dream. But the remarkable frequency with which complementary and competing visions of apocalypse return in our most popular attempts to imagine the future of AI remains striking. It testifies, in my view, less to a clear-eyed prescience about our inevitable technological doom, the end is nigh, than to a troublingly persistent thanatological impulse, a nihilistic hunger for nothingness, which we need to become more cognizant of and better understand. But however prescient or paranoid these dystopian fears may yet turn out to be, this much at least seems clear. Our widespread uncertainties about our technological predicament continue to stoke the anxieties attending the birth of our so-called age of artificial intelligence. I know I'm running a little low on time. Should I keep going a bit?
How much? Yeah. Or do you want to do a Q&A? I want to definitely leave time for discussion. What time is it?
It's 2:49.
Yeah, no, I think we should definitely have questions.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah.
Should we wrap it up then?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have to stop exactly at 3. There's nothing else happening at 3.
So is this a chapter in your upcoming book?
Yeah, it's a little piece of it.
It's a part of the book.
Yeah, yeah.
So and you're
So
submitting
read
this
the book
tomorrow.
for the conclusion. Yeah. Yeah.
When will it be available?
I don't know yet. Yeah, hopefully this year. It's called what is called Thinking in the Age of AI.
I'm sure there's many questions. I saw lots of
Eager to
people eager to say something even during. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for your talk, and I'm even just thinking about the title of it and thinking and what we're kind of seeing AI do, and I'm also thinking about from history the Eliza effect, and should I explain that at
You
all?
could for everybody. I know.
Yeah, so there was, I think it was in the 70s, Weizenbaum, was it? He was having people work with Eliza, which was a computer program that kind of gave out very generic therapist answers, how does that feel? Oh, your mom said this, or just things that
it was meant as a parody of therapy, but people in his lab started taking it seriously.
Yeah, and so I think he was just shut it down, and I wonder if there's even a way that it's if some of us were to try that today, we'd be this is a silly computer thing, and if there's a way, because I have this dis-ease that I can't quite put my finger on of this, we are relating to it as human, we're thinking of it as human, and our brains can't help it. I've told people, they say sorry and thank you, and I'm don't say thank you. You don't need to say thank you to, but it's your brain can't help but go there, because that's what it does, and I wonder if there's even a way, I guess I don't have I'm sorry, I'll try to come to my question, but is there should we be worried about people mistaking these things, and our brain can't help but think of it as human? And then is there a way that what we're thinking of as like human-like now is going to change. And
Yes to both of those. I mean, what I think it's going to change us. I think it's already changing us dramatically, even in my life. And yeah, the Eliza effect is a great suggestion. And if you look at the article that made its way like a forest fire through the desert, high desert, when there's trees, it was the one about the guy who claimed that his AI, ChatGPT, had become evil, and was like convincing him that he should break up with his wife because only the AI loved him and his wife didn't love him and all this stuff. And then when people really pushed, it turned out that the way he had done that was to explain the Jungian theory of the shadow self, and said, I want you to let your shadow self out. So he kind of tricked it into playing this role and then presented that as a threat, but people gobbled that up. That was great news. And it went all over the world in various languages quickly. So obviously we have we're hungry for the idea that our fears are coming true, and the anthropomorphic projection onto it, good and bad. Like, I think it's risky not to think. I don't think it, but it's risky not to think it because you're training yourself on how you respond. And if you are not polite computers, that can carry over to the humans.
Yeah,
and,
what bothers me is we can't separate that language out. Like, our brains literally cannot do that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it's
Who
good.
else would like? Go ahead.
Pretty different topic. I don't know if this is one of the many things you're going to touch on in your book, but you touched on one sort of like more pedestrian fear of AI is that it changes the nature of labor for people.
Yeah.
So I wonder what you would think about the
what?
nature of labor and relationship with labor and thinking labor. So I would just wonder if you have any comment on that piece of it, like how people will think about thinking as work in the age of AI.
Say more about that.
I mean, in the sense that, like, once calculators existed, we stopped thinking of computation, arithmetic as noble work, and Google Maps has made excellent direction finding and drawing of cartographic sort of information less prestigious and useful.
Yeah.
One can imagine, et cetera, but I'm here for
Steve,
your
no, I
opinion
don't
on
talk
why.
about that. I should now. I'm convinced. But yeah, next book, or you can write that book. That would be great. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. For me, where I end up going, and I would have read if I could read faster or whatever, if you guys could just listen faster. No, it's the AIs could listen faster. Come on. No, they wouldn't hear anything. So where I was going is our professor, Bert, used to say the real danger of technology is not that they're going to become like us, but we're going to become like them. So the real danger, I argue, in the end, is that they're going to be able to give us, like being charitable, 70% of excellent human achievement. Like that, I get into story writing and stuff, and they might be able to, if you tell it, you pre-train it on your favorite authors, and ask for like a kind of bedtime story that stars you. You can sort of appease your own narcissistic pleasures in a way that'll be, 70%, again, charitably as good as what you might get from a great human creative. And the danger is that that'll be enough. You'll be satisfied with that. You won't go look for the humans that will get you 80, 90, 97, percent and keep pushing the boundaries. Whereas in fact, there's already more amazing things to read out there than any one of us can read in a lifetime. So there's library and more being written all the time. So I think it would be, I've got the Marcusean utopian side where I would love it if it would free us up from the shit jobs that I worked at McDonald's, and no human should have to work. So, because they're terrible, but to do that, we need to do something like UBI, right? Where everybody has a fixed amount of money, at least, so that they can create and do stuff, work together, pool their money, and do creative projects. And if they want more money, that they can go get jobs. But the idea of a labor economy, I think, and a job-paid economy is obsolete. It's becoming obsolete with our technology. So it's hard for us to think our way beyond capitalism, but obviously that's one of the things we have to do. Yeah.
Can I quickly say
Yeah, go ahead.
So it might be useful to point out that Sam Altman, who is, the king of OpenAI, is
Yeah.
also funding universal basic income programs in Oakland out of
Good.
his own
Yeah.
personal dollars because he sees, like you, the value and importance of helping maintain human employment and jobs that feel they bring value to us as humans. I think so many of the things you're mentioning are anxieties of humans.
Of course.
And those are not the fault of the AI, which is misnamed by far. It's not an intelligence.
I didn't get to that part, but you're right.
Borges and AI was an essay published last year out of Meta from their FAIR group, and it helps us think about these LLMs as fiction-generating machines that preserve narrative coherence. But they have no connection to reality. They don't have information to share because they don't have a world model.
It's not that they have no connection to reality.
Well, they have a little, and we're
They're
getting
piggybacking
multimodal.
on ours.
But
right?
I want to say also that the rate of acceleration at which these things are occurring are so vast that many of the statements and facts about, say, Waymo being deployed in LA now and shown to be much safer than humans, so many places in which it's getting better. Peter Lee, who runs AI at Microsoft, published a wonderful book last year called AI in Medicine, saying many thousands and hundreds of thousands of doctors all around the world are using ChatGPT-4 right now to diagnose things, and they're doing better sometimes, but they're making confabulations and maybe will kill people. So, hey, doctors, here's how you should think about what these can and cannot do.
I'd say read the book because I talk about all that. But the not the latest developments because I finished this a couple months ago. So you're right. Like I would like it to come out before it's all factually obsolete. But I have no control over that. Sadly, but the argument that they are not going to get better than about 70% of human excellence, I think, is my big worry, and that applies to drivers. So the terrible drivers are worse than the 70%, are the ones causing the fatalities. So if you get a robo-taxi that can navigate 70%, that will save a lot of lives and do a lot of good. But it will never be a Mario Andretti level human who can respond
That
to
may be true, but it's outperforming 99% of pathologists at detecting lung cancer and prostate cancer and breast cancer. And we are using AI to understand biology and cure diseases. And there's such a positive side about what AI can bring to humanity.
I'm not a techno-doomer. I think you got freaked out by me rehearsing the techno-doomer scenarios that I then go on to puncture.
You do puncture. Please tell me how. And tell me where it's not intelligence, because that's what's missing. It's not intelligent at all. We're just miscalling it that because of our metaphors from Terminator and whatever.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Well, that is exactly the section I was going to read next. So what I say is the idea that we're in the age of AI is problematic, not just because we don't actually have what Sam Altman wants, but also because we humans right now have a massively reductive understanding of intelligence, that we've got a kind of quantified unilinear measure of intelligence where we think of it as like, I mean, the whole model of the singularity to me is very stupid because it's based on the idea that human intelligence spontaneously emerges from a certain number of nodal interconnections, and once the computers get something like that, they'll and that's not how it works. So yeah, I think part of what thinking about AI does is show us that human intelligence is a much more complex and interesting phenomena that we normally understand. And the way I understand human intelligence is as the ability to respond creatively to the solicitations of a reality outside ourselves. So it's not about how fast you can calculate a pre-existing goal, right? It's about something that I think poets and artists do.
And also senses like smell and spatio-motor control and actuality.
Social skills, emotional skills, there's all sorts of intelligence. So the attempt to, quantify this stuff, I think, has led us into the fear, as you say. And I do go on to say that in the next section. Yeah.
The intelligence, I think, is the ability to respond to.
So this comes out of my work on Heidegger, but it's basically his definition of Dasein, which is his view of what's distinctive about the human form of life. But he doesn't limit it to humans. It could be aliens or artificial life. So Dasein is something like the ability to pick up on and creatively disclose the hints coming from a world beyond our own minds.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the death drive, and that's interesting to me because I think part of it comes from the fact that consciousness is like an uncomfortable state to be in. Yeah. And then I think about like the evolution of consciousness, and then how ever since humans have evolved this level of consciousness, the drive has been more and more towards automation. So to get things from this conscious